Right now at Banana Republic Factory, save big with 50 to 70% off the entire store. Plus, take an extra 50% off clearance. Stock up on dresses and polos starting at $19.99. Find your nearest store or shop online only at Banana Republic Factory.
This is No BS Job Search Advice Radio, episode 1475. I'm Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, and welcome. Welcome to another episode. And it's Sunday on Memorial Day weekend. I'm not going to release a show tomorrow. Let's all just enjoy ourselves for once instead of always pushing hard and trying to do more work. And today's show, well, it's not an honoring show for veterans. It's really an honoring show for those of you who are thinking of changing careers. And it's an interview I did with Marc Miller of Career Pivot. Well, actually, his podcast is Career Pivot. And I believe the website is the same as well, careerpivot.com. Marc, at the time I interviewed him, was living in Texas. He's now in Mexico, practicing some of the things that he wanted to do in life and still work, but live in a place where he and his wife wanted to live. And today's show is really zeroed in on what he does, career change. And it's a good interview that we did several years ago. Hope you find it helpful. Hope you give it a great review. Listen, you may learn something from this one. It's about 30 some odd minutes in length. You know, you got time during the day today. You're off, right? So I hope you find it helpful, and let's get going.
And I've spoken to many people who've, well, frankly, their careers have left them, and also people who have found that they wanted to leave their long-standing career. So I thought it'd be a great opportunity to do a show about changing careers and the kind of things that a person should do in order to make a career change. So my guest today is Marc Miller, who's the head of CareerPivot.com. He's an author on the subject as well, and I thought he'd be able to provide us with some great advice about career changing. Marc Miller, welcome to Job Search Radio. Great to have you on board.
Thank you, Jeff. It's great to be with you.
Thank you. You know, I was doing some prep for the show, and I was looking at your bio on the website. Marc, you look like a poster child for the career changer that you're probably helping professionally. Why did you decide to change careers? What happened to you that prompted you to make some of the changes you've made?
Well, I joke I'm on my seventh career, and I'm a
7?
So there are some people claim that I can't hold a job. But what the reality is I get bored easily. Every 3 to 5 years, I would want to make a change. Now, I started my career back in the days in the early 1970s when companies liked you to be this well-rounded generalist. They liked you to make transitions. And so I kind of bounced around a lot, from being a programmer to being an engineer to being in marketing and sales to being in training. I went off, and believe it or not, to high school math late in my career. I did nonprofit fundraising, and then I started Career Pivot back in 2011, primarily because I saw more of my friends, all in their 50s and 60s, being wiped out in these last 2 recessions. And knowing that they wouldn't be able to retire, and many of them were seeing their industries and jobs completely go away. And I seem to kind of do this with kind of an ease. So the answer comes down to is I do it because I like doing it. I like the variety.
And it sounds like what you did ultimately was physician, heal thyself. You started working on yourself to make another change, and in doing so, created a business where you're able to help others. So, you know, it must be hard to suddenly wake up one day. I saw that you'd worked for IBM for a long time and discover it's time to move on. I don't know if it was voluntary or forced, but, you know, a lot of Americans, a lot of people around the world have been experiencing issues with their employers waking up one day and saying, you know, we don't really need Susan, Joe, or Shalendra anymore. It's time to move on and go in a different direction. again, looking at your background, it sounds like that's what your experience is. So in looking at yourself and some of the people that you coach, how does someone start off this evaluation process or start the process of moving into a different field?
Yeah, it's rather interesting. I joke that I was raised by my parents to be an employee, to go work for a father-like company that would take care of me. And then I would be able to work for 30 and 40 years and retire into the sunset, which we all know that didn't happen.
Doesn't happen.
They moved my cheese. And the reality is most of us have been very reactive in our careers rather than being proactive. So when IBM changed their pension plan back in the late 90s, and I went, oh, geez, I don't trust you anymore, and I left. Now, that was highly unusual. I've been referred to within IBM as the IBM Underground Railroad. I help people get out because people still keep on trying to hang on. Well, I can make through it one more layoff. And so the process I've kind of laid out is a 5-step process. And the first one is know thyself. Most of us throughout our career, we've kind of forgotten who we are. We've acquired a lot of skills that our employers want us to acquire, and by the way, they pay us for them. But reality is we've forgotten after 20 or 30 years what makes us happen, what makes us really good.
How does someone get to know themselves? For many people, I think they forget after a while what their core is. How do we start to relearn who we are?
Well, I do 2 things. Number one, I've done a lot of assessments. The one I really, really liked was the Berkman, which has been around since the 1950s.
Berkman is Birkman?
Yes, and it's Berkman.com. It picked me apart. It will tell me, number one, how I appear, which is what Myers-Briggs and DISC will tell you, but it will also tell you how I want to be treated. And it's when those how I appear and how I want to be treated get really out of kilter. So I use the example. I've got a client who I refer to as my structured anarchist. He appears very, very orderly. He's done that because he got into finance. He's been a CFO. Very orderly. The problem is it just has to be his order. So,
very rules-based, I can tell.
Well, the point is, where he's really good at is walking into chaos and creating order out of chaos. But no one ever places him there because he's so orderly. And one of the things I've got him to realize is he now goes and asks for, I want to go there where it's chaos. I want to go build the systems. He would have never done that before. That was clearly shown. The other piece is go back and look at your career. And when have you been the happiest? When did you have a boss that you really liked? Why? When did you feel really valued at work? What the heck did they do? And by the way, most of the time it's not money. When did you have a team you really enjoyed? What was the makeup of that team? When did you have the right amount of activity? And believe it or not, this makes a whole lot more, has more effect on your happiness than anything else, is I can't sit behind a desk. But when I went off and taught high school math, I was happy. I was on my feet all day.
I'm going to interrupt you here for a second because sure. I want to make sure everyone gets the idea that you're talking about where you've been successful earlier in your life and where you had real joy and happiness in your work and in your environment, where your successes were, where they weren't, and trying to start from that benchmark place of identifying it. Now, for some folks, obviously, they may be earlier in their career, So I don't want anyone to think that this show is only for the older workforce. This is true of less experienced people as well, that they have the opportunity to do that kind of reflection as well. Am I right?
Yes. In fact, I'm working with a client who's 30 years old right now. She's been working for about 10 years, and she knows when things have been good, when have been bad. This is particularly true with the millennials, the Gen Yers, who are changing jobs every year to 2 years. They're seeing a greater variety and an opportunity, by the way, to screw up and walk into situations that are not to their liking. And what do you learn from that?
Well, normally what I would say to someone is identify that which you don't care for in these particular situations. Identify what the problem areas were, and then flip them to the other side to see what the polar opposite would be. Now, often people are uncomfortable with that, but we can start working to get more toward the middle place, where they can find satisfaction and happiness once they've explored the two extremes. Again, not sure if that's part of your methodology, but I know when I've coached people, that's one of the things that I do.
Yep. Now, the second step is to build your tribe. Your tribe, if you think about it, we are able to maintain about a maximum of about 150 relationships in our lives. This has been proved over and over again. And I call your tribe as those people that you can go to who, if you asked a favor, it would likely be granted. So who's in your tribe? Now, in every career transition I've made, I call them half-step career transitions. I had 1 foot in the old world, 1 foot in the new world, and there was always a relationship that took me across. In other words, I never did it alone. So
by reaching out to other people, they didn't necessarily pave the way, but they could answer a lot of the questions about the environment that you were considering stepping into.
They could help me, but more importantly, it almost always required someone taking even a small bit of risk to help me get across. In other words, it was a relationship that helped me. It might have been an introduction. It may have been someone who hired me because they knew me from a past life or from a past career. There was always a helping hand.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And I want to explore that a little bit further, but I will also want to give my audience the Job Search Insider tip for this show. So bear with me for a second. And folks, let me just simply tell you that when recruiters, whether corporate recruiters or third-party recruiters, evaluate candidates, there has been a methodology that's been created that active job applicants, that is people aggressively looking for a position, are not as good. They're of a lower status than those who are considered passive job applicants. Now, why that is ridiculous. So I'm not going to go into that. But I want to talk with you about how to create the appearance of being a passive person rather than being active. Because if you're going to be looking for work, you want to take advantage of this bias and kind of create the impression as though you are passive. So step number 1 is make sure your LinkedIn profile is keyword laden in the language of the kind of jobs that you want to work in. Not sure what that language is? Go to some job boards, take a look at some corporate ads, see the language that they use, and start looking for the repeat patterns in that language. Once you see the repeat patterns, start working that into your LinkedIn profile, because that's obviously what firms are searching for. So that's the first step. The second step is if you are going to post your resume, make sure you do not include your name, address, phone number on it, but instead use what's called a blind resume. That is one that might have a unique email address for that particular job board that forwards to your address. So this way, they can't see your name, develop that association. They think they're going to find you in some way on a job board, or not on a job board, but on LinkedIn, and you're hiding from the fact that you're out looking. So take those 2 steps to take advantage of that bias, and you're going to start to notice that employers and third-party recruiters are going to be more excited to be contacting you about finding positions. So I hope you find that tip helpful. I have a lot more at my website, which is thebiggamehunter.us. So there are videos, podcasts, articles I've written. You can receive a complimentary subscription to my e-zine there. There's plenty of material there to help you with job hunting. So come over to thebiggamehunter.us and go exploring. Now let's come back to Marc and pick up our conversation about tribes. And you were saying that people have had to take a risk with you, whether that was in providing the introduction or, for that matter, ultimately in hiring you. Why do you think they took that risk?
Well, because they already knew who I was, knew my values, and knew my skills, and were willing to allow me to make that transition. In other words, I didn't walk in with everything that was required. And, in fact, I'm writing a blog post here in the next week or so on career transitions between industries. And it's willing to have just enough, skill to allow people to change, and someone's going to have to take a little bit of risk. And
it's funny you raised this as a subject. I'm sorry for interrupting. I was saying, I'm sorry. It's funny that you raised this as a subject. There's been an article I'd seen in the Wall Street Journal for about 7 years running that said that 20% of all positions are filled by people who really don't fit the job requirement, but someone likes them and is willing to give them a chance.
Right. And the key piece there is yes, it's someone who probably already knows you. We live in a referral economy. And so I call it build that referral network where you want to be.
Beautiful.
Which leads right into the next step, which is to network strategically.
These two are linked. I was going to ask you, how do you find the members of your tribe to network with strategically? Let's combine the two in there with that question.
Well, the point here is one of the things you want to do is you want to look at your tribe, and one of the key ones is you want a certain number of connectors in your tribe. There was a very good podcast by the Harvard Business Review talking about 5 to 10% of your tribe should be connectors, and those are the people who like making introductions. They do it because they know a lot of people and they enjoy helping people. So one of the things I did when I started my business is I looked around at my tribe and said, you know what? I don't have enough salespeople here in Austin, Texas, where I live. So I purposely started looking to meet salespeople, and I happened to belong to a couple different groups, and I specifically went out and networked for those. The other piece is if you want to target a specific company, you can get on LinkedIn, look at who do you need to meet within that company, and then start looking in your network and within your tribe and say, who can make me an introduction? Who can make a warm lead? This is sales, and you're the product. So this is all about strategically working through your tribe and through your network to meet the people that you need to meet.
And one of the fun ways people can start to figure out strategically who to reach out to and who can provide the introduction. Again, going back to LinkedIn, which is such a valuable resource, but most people kind of use it like, I need to be connected with so-and-so, I want to connect with so-and-so, and it's very one-directional. There's a couple of fun things that people can do, including go to the company page for the firm that you want to connect with, or get an introduction to. And then in the current version of LinkedIn on the right-hand side, you'll see people who are already currently in your network who work for that firm. Now, they can be first or second connections. I don't recall if they show third-level connections there. But that becomes a way that you can quickly identify who it is who works for that firm. And then you can start working your network to see if they can provide introductions to the right person if they aren't that individual. Are there other techniques that you recommend?
Well, one other thing is interesting. With so many companies being remote, one of the things I do is go to the company page, go do exactly like you said, look to see who in that company, and then dash off into advanced search and enter your zip code. And see how many of those people who work for that company are actually in your city. I find very commonly, particularly here in Austin, there are a lot of companies here that have employees here, and they're not located anywhere in the South. They're off in California or Washington, but they may have 20, 30, 40, or 100 employees here. And you'd never know that because they don't. And many of them don't even have a physical presence here. They don't have an office.
That's a great tip.
To find out, right?
Is it?
Who's here? And so the other way is to use, one of the other common one. I have a client who has a Latin American connection, and we just went in, entered our zip code into advanced search, and in the title field entered Latin America, and says to see who has Latin America or Latin American in their job title. In other words,
or in that specific case, you might use LATAM, L-A-T-A-M.
Yeah, that's right. You try various different variations and see what comes up. I have a client right now who's interested in software as a service companies, and we just, in the keyword, we typed in SaaS, S-A-A-S, and we came up with a number of different companies that we had no idea were here. And so
terrific tip.
It's getting creative, particularly because companies very often don't have where their employees is not where they have locations. Now, the other piece is acting on facts and not assumptions. Just like, well, so-and-so company doesn't have an office in my town. Well, you don't know that. The other example is I went off to teach high school math back in 2004, and I assumed I was going to take the school district's health insurance. Well, the health
learned the hard way, huh?
Well, it was my out-of-pocket expense was double my COBRA payment because I just assumed. The answer is never assume.
So here you're talking about making sure when you're doing the evaluation of the next situation that it meets some of your expectations. And in your case, because you'd worked in corporate America for so long, you had no idea how benefits had worked in the public sector. And in your case, in the school system you were in, it was far more expensive. I think you told me this the other day. It was far more expensive to use their insurance than it was for COBRA coverage. So it's important to investigate some of the minutia that could explode on you in the wrong way.
That's right. And the easiest way of doing this is reach out to people who are currently working at the business and reach out to people who have left the business and find out why they left. Now, I call this asking for air. You ask for advice, insights, and recommendations. By the way, when you ask for advice, people rarely turn you down. It's a compliment. You ask for the insights, but more important, you ask for the recommendations. Who should I talk to next? Can you introduce me to someone? What should I do? And the whole piece here is when you do that, by the way, you take an interest in them. By the way, when you take an interest in them, you are more likable. By the way, people hire people they like.
And you're asking people to do something that's very difficult in U.S. culture. And I did this as a job search tip 1 or 2 shows ago. practice asking for help.
Right. Asking
People
for help.
want to help, and we find it so hard to ask for help.
Yes, well, I'm a guy, I don't like asking for directions. So, particularly make career transitions where you're not going to be the expert anymore, you're going to have to eat a little humble pie. When I went off to teach high school math, I ended up teaching Algebra 1, Algebra 2. I had a great Algebra 1 mentor. I was lost teaching Algebra 2. I eventually found another teacher who was about, I was old enough to be her father, and I said, "Can I have your lesson plans, please?" And what I did for an entire year was I picked up her lesson plans and I stayed 2 days behind her. So if I didn't understand, I could always go in and watch her. I played humble. And sometimes you need to do that.
Absolutely, because anyone changing careers at this point, whether forced or voluntary, you stop being the expert at what you're doing. You're back to being the student again. And even if you've been doing some of the work that you've been doing part-time or as a hobbyist, now people are paying you, and you want more people to be paying you for your expertise, you need to learn. You need to be a student again. And best of all, in doing so, what I interpret that relationship with that teacher to be is like a mentor-mentee relationship, where that other teacher was mentoring you in that particular class, so that in this way you could wind up following in her footsteps, following in his footsteps. I don't know if you mentioned the gender there, and learning from them and then bringing it to your own classroom, as opposed to learning by the seat of your pants, right?
Yep. And the key piece here is most of us make these transitions very often. This is like walking off a cliff. You can be pushed, laid off, and be forced into it. 2, you can walk up to the cliff, look over, take a step back, and go, Geronimo! Or 3, you can actually go, okay, I see it coming. I'm going to prepare, and I'm going to get a parachute, and I'm going to carefully plan this out. I currently have a couple of clients at a major drug company. And like many of the drug companies, they're all kind of collapsing because they have lots of patents expiring. So we're planning out 18-month to 2-year plans for them to leave. Now, very likely, both of them will end up being consultants. So they're planning out that transition. Now, if a hand-raising comes along or a layoff occurs, they're prepared. They've already got things in the works. They've already been talking to people. So it's kind of planning it out to when you move on your terms and not on their terms.
And you hit on something here that's very important. Now, folks, you may be past this stage, but I know a lot of my listeners are thinking about making the job change and haven't really taken the first step or hasn't had it taken for them yet, if you know what I mean. And that is, there are signals that firms give. If you read a newspaper and you saw, and just to use the example of the drug companies, when the Affordable Care Act was being passed, there was a lot of information that said if you're in the drug business, reimbursements are going to be cut. If you're working for a hospital, the amount of reimbursement is going to be cut. What's the result of that? Less income for the institution, less need for people because they can't afford to run at a deficit for very long, right? They've got shareholders they report to. Don't be blind to the news that's out there. Be aware and ask yourself the question, if this is true and if this happens, how might that affect me? Doesn't guarantee that it will affect you because obviously you could be the one person saved. But you don't want to be foolish and be caught completely blindsided by someone who says, "Can I see you in my office for a second?" And we all know what that means. So
we are seeing more disruptive technology today than we've ever seen before, and particularly this is if you are a specialist, will your specialty be around in 10 years? And that's a question that you need to ask yourself. Think about it. If you are in Facebook marketing right now, will Facebook marketing be around in 10 years? I don't know. It wasn't here 10 years ago.
There were people who always thought Microsoft would be top banana.
Yep.
And they're in the process of reinventing themselves yet again. So you can't make the assumption that because you're doing it now, there's a career forever. And I think my favorite current example of this that I see on the horizon is for people who are truck drivers or might be cab drivers. You know, just be aware the technology has surfaced already and will get better for driverless vehicles. You know, the Google car, you know, is an example of a driverless vehicle. Is it perfect yet? No, but no one's asking it to deliver things yet. But people have been behind the alleged wheel of one, which is really there's a safety precaution more than anything. Marvel at the fact that this car takes people someplace. It will happen, maybe not in my lifetime, maybe later in your child's lifetime. Be aware that changes are coming. Make no assumptions. They are on the horizon and may affect you too. So, Mark, this is terrific. I want to make sure I have everything summarized for my listeners. So I heard you talk about initially becoming aware of yourself and what your needs are, where you were happiest, where you weren't happy, and start to recreate those in your life. Then start to build your tribe. You know, that is the people with whom you're in relationship with, and network strategically. Now, I actually missed one. I just spotted in my notes. And that is, make no assumptions. Make no assumptions about what the outcome is, what's going to be offered to you, what the benefits are like. And you gave that great example of health insurance coverage when you were a teacher and discovering that it really stank. So make no assumptions. Explore the details there. And the hard one for everyone to hear, but it is critical, making sure that you ask for advice or help.
So that's today's show. I hope you found it helpful. And if you did, here are a few more ways to get more from me. First of all, visit my website, which is thebiggamehunter.us. I have more than 6,000 blog posts there that you can watch, listen to, or read that will help you find your next job. If you want the best of my advice, join JobSearch.Coaching.HQ.com, where I've curated information with a focus on interviewing. If you decide to take the lifetime membership at the site, it's $299 currently, but that's the price of a coaching session or an hour of coaching from me, and I'll be giving that to you if you join with a lifetime membership. Have a few questions? Contact me through the Magnify app for iOS or PrestoExperts.com, where you can call me. Schedule a specific time with me through chat on Magnify or by connecting with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/IN/The Big Game Hunter. Once we're connected on LinkedIn, you can message me about coaching you, scheduling a time for Magnify or Presto Experts, speak with me about a resume or LinkedIn profile critique, help you with a salary negotiation or my trusted advisor services, and much, much more. Like you, I don't work for free. I do charge for what I do. You can take my classes on Skillshare and become a premium member using the link in the show notes and receive 2 months for free instead of just the one that the site offers. Skillshare offers thousands and thousands of courses, not just simply mine, on a host of different subjects that can help you in many different ways. Lastly, join my group on Facebook called Career Angles. It's free to the first 250 people who join and is focused on helping you do better at work. Information is shared daily, and we're attempting to build a supportive group there. Ask to join. I'm not letting recruiters in at this point. So I'll be back tomorrow with more, and in the meantime, I hope you have a great day. Be great!
Napa know-how.
This week, if you're a AAA member, you can pick up a Napa bucket for $2.99 and get 20% off almost everything you can fit inside. Meaning you can save cash on quality parts, like batteries, brake pads, and more, just for being a AAA member. So hurry in and save 20% with the Napa bucket. Quality parts, helpful people. That's Napa know-how.
Napa know-how.
At participating Napa Auto Parts stores, exclusions apply. Minimum 3 items may not be combined with other offers. Offer ends 5/29/19.